What's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to talk about the Whirlwind Barbarian Diablo IV. I've leveled this all the way up to 100 now, and I got lots to chat about, and I'm going to be as succinct as possible to give you the most cohesive Barbarian video I possibly can, so you have all the tools that you need to simulate the Barb the way I've been enjoying it, or maybe do even better, which would be great, right? We're going to talk about things like gear, spec, Paragon Board, Elixirs, options for all this stuff. So without further ado, let's take this build for a spin. One of the most important things with the Barbarian class to discover is how damage actually works for the class. To get the most damage out of the Barbarian possible, you're going to aim for the following stats. You're going to go for Vulnerable, you're going to go for Strength or all stats, Critical Strike damage, and then damage to close or core. The reason you want to do this is the values from Vulnerable damage, Strength or stats, and Critical Strike damage and close, they all multiply off of each other. So you want to get this on as many different pieces of gear as you possibly can. This way you have a high percentage multiplying against another high percentage. If you look at my character sheet here, I've got vulnerable damage of 393, my critical strike damage is 507.2, and I've got a whole cluster of other situations: damage versus elites, damage versus close, damage with core, damage with physical, all these other additive percentages that are multiplying against vulnerable, then multiplying against critical strike damage. And ultimately, having more strength benefits us as well, because strength multiplies across that in addition. So let me try to break down the way damage is going to work for you as clear as I can. Let's make sure we're using the bludgeoning weapon, okay? So we press S to open up our skills flyout menu. I mouse over Whirlwind, my main attack, and it is using the Dread Mace of Dire Whirlwind. Again, I middle mouse click to assign that, right? Perfect. It's a bludgeoning weapon, so I'm good to go. Checking out my character, it's like this, right? I'm a big, strong dude. I've got 1,062 strength. So I'm going to increase my damage by 106.3%. The damage of the thing I'm helping out is this bludgeoning weapon, which deals 2,939 average DPS. So I'm swinging a big 2,939 damage bludgeoning weapon. Okay, I'm going to multiply 2,939 by 106.3%, and let's say I hit something with a critical strike. I then multiply that number by 507.2%. If that target was vulnerable, I multiply those numbers by 393.1%. And if I happen to hit a guy that was an elite while he was slowed, close to me, bleeding his guts out, fortified because I'm looking real good with a physical attack that's Whirlwind, and he was hit with that Whirlwind, that extra bucket there, by the way, would be an additional 790.8%. That's about how much damage I'm doing with a build like this. Let's take a look at this Mace Whirlwind build that I'm using. 1 point in a lunging strike, 1 point in enhanced lunging strike. I then put all 5 points in a Whirlwind, 1 point enhanced, 1 point violent Whirlwind. I put 3 points in a pressure point. Moving down, I put all 5 points in a rallying cry, all the way up into tactical rallying cry. I put all 5 points in a challenging shout, over into tactical challenging shout, 1 point into war cry, 1 point enhanced, 1 point into power war cry. I then put all 3 points in a booming voice, all 3 points in a guttural yell. Moving down, I put 3 points into no mercy and 3 points into pit fighter. I then put 1 point into thick skin and 3 points into counteroffensive. Following that, 3 points into heavy handed, 3 points into wallop, 3 points into concussion. I put 1 point into Wrath of the Berserker, and I maxed that out all the way up to Supreme Wrath of the Berserker. And then finally, I put 1 point into Unbridled Rage. So digging into the build a bit, I don't take the combat lunging strike because this only works when lunging strike critically strikes that I get Berserk. I want to be spinning all the time, so I'll save that point till later on. And again, the Mace version is going to be using Violent Whirlwind. It's not using Furious, which bleeds. This is saying after you've channeled Whirlwind, then you get a 30% multiplicative damage increase till it's canceled. That's where Mace really starts to shine. You just get a bunch more damage. In addition to that, we definitely max out Whirlwind. Pressure point, when you put 3 points into it, it's not giving you a total of 50% lucky hit chance because you've got 20% from Whirlwind and an additional 30. It's not how that works. It's multiplicative. So you've got 20%, and then this off pressure point will give you 30% of 20. So you actually get 26% chance to lucky hit to apply vulnerable with pressure point. So we'll take that. It's worth it. Vulnerable, we put so much emphasis on making something vulnerable in the game that we get such an incredible damage benefit because of that situation. We're trying to make that happen as often as possible. Pressure point definitely helps with that. Moving down, we max out all of our shouts. You're going to be playing around your shouts. In the beginning with the Barbarian, this class is very slow. It doesn't really turn on or start to become like a good feeling class until about level 60, 70. You're probably realizing that right now. When you're in the slog, like level 50, it's like, damn, this class doesn't feel good yet. But I see people spinning all the time. They're probably higher level than you. They've got Paragon Board points. Maybe they've got some gear choices you haven't made. We'll talk about that in the gearing section too. The class takes a while to get going, and you might feel like that's unfair. Trust me, I understand. I get it. I leveled to 100 with it. I know. But it gets better. Stick with the Barb. It'll treat you right. So we max out Rallying Cry. We max out Challenging Shout. We max out 1 point into Warcry, but then we max out Power Cry. So we get 10% multiplicative damage bonus when we showed at least 6 things. On a boss, it's not all that great, but in the gear portion, you'll see why that's relevant. Okay, moving on, what else do we choose down here? So we're going to take Booming Voice. It just makes those shouts last 24% longer. Awesome. The longer the shouts are up, the better our class performs because we're really shout-centric in this Whirlwind experience. And then Guttural Yell. As I yell at you, I'm like, huh, right? You're like, oh shit, you kind of back off a bit, right? Awesome. All enemies affected by that deal 12% less damage. That's more significant as you climb like higher level nightmare dungeons and do more difficult content. You're going to want that. I do not have 1 point in Raid Leader. I do use Temerity Pants. You'll see that in the gear. I don't choose Raid Leader though. And I understand you can get on my back about that. It's a personal choice. Take it easy. Yeah? Let's check this out. Moving in, I get 3 points into No Mercy. My amulet, you'll see in the gearing section, also has 9%. So 9 and 9 is 18, and I have 18% increased critical strike chance against things that are immobilized, stunned, or slowed. Awesome. I then got Pit Fighter maxed out because we're always in the conversation being close. That's fantastic. I then move on to 1 point into Thick Skin, and then I max out Counter Offensive. As long as I'm fortified over 50% of my life, and you'll notice Fortify is like all the time, we're going to do additional damage. Multiplicative 12% damage. We'll take that. It's fantastic. Now, the Barbarian that's using the Mace Whirlwind spec gets to enjoy the following stuff, right? Everybody's going to take heavy-handed. We're always doing two-handed damage with Whirlwind, but right here, right? 3 points into Wallop, and then 3 points into Concussion. So basically it says, whenever I'm Whirlwinding, I've got a 45% chance to stun something for 3 seconds. Well, that's all the time. And you'll see things get stunned pretty frequently. And then you have Wallop. Your skills using... So basically, right? Whirlwind using a mace deals 15% increased multiplicative damage if the enemy's stunned or vulnerable. Well, 45% of the time you should be, if you're able to. And if you're vulnerable, then fantastic. You get your ass kicked. Fantastic. I then take Wrath of the Berserker because it's just so good. Wrath of Berserker, I love it. You could take Call of the Ancients. I don't do that. I really love the Wrath of Berserker gameplay, so I go for that. And then finally, Unbridled Rage. I get this question a lot when I'm streaming. It's, when should I switch into Whirlwind? Really, whenever you're comfortable with it. But you're not going to really feel the power of Whirlwind until you get Unbridled Rage. It's going to just deplete your fury rapidly, but the damage is so significant from this passive, this key passive. It's just so huge. I'd recommend, once you have access to this, then go Whirlwind if you're leveling as like Upheaval or Dual Swing or whatever have you, right? Yeah. Amazing. If you want to look at the slashing spec, this is what you might want to check out. 1 point into Lunging Strike, 1 point into Enhanced Lunging Strike. You're going to go into Furious Whirlwind this time. You're still going to max out Whirlwind. We're still going to go with Pressure Point because it's very good, 26% of the time. Making something vulnerable is pretty great. Again, moving down, we max out our shouts. All the shouts are the same. We're not changing that. That's the rule of thumb. We live by the shout, we die by the shout. If it's up, we're up. If it's not, we're probably out of the game. That's fine. So max out Rallying Cry, max out Challenging Shout, 1 point in War Cry, all the way over to Power War Cry. You'll see in this version, 1 point in a Raid Leader if you've got Temerity Pants, the unique. You're then still going to max out Booming Voice and Guttural Yell. I then have, again, maxed out No Mercy, maxed out Pit Fighter. I have the 1 point special Hamstring. Your bleeding effects slow enemies by 10%. The bleeding effect that we have is called Whirlwind with Furious Whirlwind. While using a slashing weapon, Whirlwind will also inflict 40% of its damage as bleed over 5 seconds. So everything is crowd controlled because you slow it by 10% for 1 point in Hamstring. You just do that, you're going to see a massive, massive increase on what your Barbarian can do because of that singular point. Probably one of the most impactful points in the whole slashing archetype for Whirlwind. Moving on, again, 1 point Thick Skin, 3 points Counter Offensive. In addition, though, we now get Tempered Fury, which increases our max Fury by 3, just to get into Invigorating Fury. So we heal for 9% of our maximum life for every 100 Fury spent. And the default amount of Fury you have as a Barbarian is 100. So as you're hitting and generating Fury, you're just constantly a little bit more tanky because you're regenerating this amount of life as you kill everything. It's awesome. And we're still going to stay with Unbridled Rage. So based off both versions, I'd recommend you play Maces when you get an option to do so at the later stages of the game, like around level, I would say probably 80, 85, you could do the swap. It depends on your level of comfort. Like there's nothing wrong with the slashing build. It's really good. You're going to help, slay out. But the thing I don't like about it is you're waiting for bleeds to complete so that things die. Whereas Whirlwind with Mace, you just clap them, they're stunned, and they take like massive amounts of damage in comparison. Like I might do 500k with the slashing, whereas I happen to stun a guy, and then he gets hit for like 1.3 million. It's just less waiting, more uptime. I don't like waiting for things to bleed out and die. I'd rather just smack them in the face with a fridge and say, hey, how's it going? And they're toast, right? Pick up the loot and move on. That's what I like. So to each their own, but now you have the option between slashing and Mace's bludgeoning type for you. So let's talk about the gear that I wear for the Barbarian while I'm using the Bludgeoning Whirlwind build. I'm using the Sovereign Helm of Disobedience. It's got cooldown reduction, maxed out at 14.6. This is a 765 item that's been upgraded 5 times at the blacksmith. It's also given me 717 maximum life. It's got main stat rolled to 62% and maximum fury of 17 out of 27. I'm using the Disobedience aspect, which is increasing my armor value up to 50% whenever I deal any form of damage, which is Lunging Strike or Whirlwind in this regard. For the chest, I'm using the Runic Mail of Numbing Wrath, so I've got increased armor value. It's got +4 Shout for Rallying Cry. It's got +4 for Challenging Shout, and I've rolled damage reduction on it. And each point of Fury generated while at maximum Fury grants up to 26% Fortify. I've got 12 at the moment. For my gloves, I'm using Relentless Berserker's Doom Gauntlets. Again, this is maxed 5 times at the blacksmith. I've got 11.3% critical strike chance, 4 ranks of Whirlwind. I've got a chance to heal myself, and I've also rolled main stat on them. So damaging an enemy with the core skill, basically Whirlwind, has up to a 40% chance to extend the duration of berserking by 1 second, but basically 2 seconds if I critically strike, which I'm always trying to do. When it comes to the glove slot, you could also use Gore's Devastating Grips. I used to use these all the time, but attack speed doesn't affect Whirlwind. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't. I've had conversations all over the place. I'm going to say no. I don't see a damage multiplicative off of that. So because it doesn't, that's 1 dead stat. Lucky hit chance doesn't really matter to me. Non-physical damage really only speaks to the explosion that Gore's does, and the 4 ranks of Whirlwind I think is incredible. So it's not that Gore's is bad. I just prefer to get a little bit more active stats and then another effect other than an explosion that's very small and doesn't always connect. And so I try to extend the duration of Berserking because Berserking gives me 25% increased damage and 15% increased movement speed. I love that much better. As for the pants, I am using the unique Temerity pants. And so when injured, your potion also grants movement speed for 2 seconds. That's cool to get out of dodge. It gives me all stats, which helps on the Paragon board. Gives me potion drop rate, lucky hit chance to heal again. And then the thing about Temerity that's cool is it says effects that heal you beyond 100% of your life grant you a barrier up to 64%, up to 80% in this case, of your maximum life that lasts for 8 seconds. So the barrier's nice because I'm also using the conceded legendary aspect. We'll get to that in a minute. So things that would heal me over 100% would be like chance to heal on the gloves, right? Chance to heal, a potion. If I use a potion that's going to heal me over that, that's fine too. Temerity so far, great. The other alternative would be like a very thick, in this example, like defensive set of pants that I'm not using. Damage while fortified, damage against things that are bleeding, damage versus close, damage reduction. I'm using these instead. As for the chest, really quick to bounce back, I do have the Rage of Harrogath. So Rage of Harrogath is great because it gives you increased physical damage, gives you critical strike damage against elites, also gives you damage reduction against everything that's bleeding. So if you're playing the slashing build, that's pretty good. What's nice about Rage of Harrogath is it does that unique power up to a 40%, I rolled 38, chance to reduce your cooldowns of all of your shouts, basically, by 1.5 seconds when you inflict bleeding on elites. So that's kind of nice because it makes sure that the shouts are up whenever you can get them up, like as often as possible. But I'd rather have +4 to both of those shouts instead, personally. But I'm just letting you know that Rage of Harrogath is an option that many seek out just to make the quality of life gameplay a little bit better. And in the early levels, if you don't have a chest like this, that's fine. Seek out Rage of Harrogath because it'll make your shouts come up even faster. And basically one of the shouts that matters for us is right here, Rallying Cry, right? The one that generates resource for us, which is Fury. The more that we can rally and cry, the more that we're going to have Fury to use to spend on Whirlwind. So in this regard, I think Rage of Harrogath's quite nice. Boots, you're looking for things like this. Max evade charges. If you've ever watched people go around town and they're strutting around like crazy and you don't know why your evade charges went away, it's because the evade charges are dictated by the boots that you've got. So some might say you have increased movement speed after you evade. Some might say +2 evade charges. Some may say 3. I prefer 3 evade, and I think you should go for that too. This one also increases my berserk duration, movement speed, increases my movement speed whenever I kill an elite, and also I've added the ability to reduce my fury cost, which is basically saying reduce the cost of Whirlwind. I then added the Ghost Walker aspect on there, so when I'm unstoppable, and for 4 seconds after, I get 25% increased movement speed, and I can move wherever the hell I want. So when do I get unstoppable? Unstoppable happens when I use Rallying Cry. It gives me unstoppable, and for 4 seconds after that. So that's pretty sweet. So at least you're moving around looking real nice. On my two-handed bludgeoning weapon, I'm using the Dire Whirlwind aspect, and I'm looking for those properties, right? Vulnerable damage, all stats are strength, critical strike damage, damage to closer core. And then I've got a perfect roll, 1648, and I'm putting emeralds in my weapons. I recommend you always put emeralds in your weapons. The one-handed conceded, so Deal 25% increased damage while you have a barrier. And we know now with Temerity, I get that barrier pretty frequently. And that barrier is quite healthy. It's 64% of my total life, which in this case is 11,876. So I just get 25% increased multiplicative damage as long as I press a potion before I go into combat, or I happen to get a lucky hit and heal myself. That's pretty great. In addition, look at how I rolled the item, right? It's got 95 strength, vulnerable, damage to slow. That's not core or close, but it's in the same bucket of damage that's additive. So that's kind of nice. The other one is Serpent's Bite of Retribution. This one has, again, vulnerable, strength, bleeding, core close, right? Again, bleeding, it's the exact same as core close, same additive amount. That could be better too. And then I have critical strike damage. So this one, as you can tell, I'm built for the bludgeoning build because I've got this retribution aspect. I don't care about distant enemies have a chance to be stunned for 2 seconds. I only care about dealing 40% increased multiplied damage when things are stunned. And so I make sure, and this is how you do this, by the way, I make sure by pressing S to bring up my skills menu to go over my lunging strike and my whirlwind and assign the weapon to it. So you middle mouse click to change the weapon. Okay, I'm clicking my middle mouse, and that's how I can convert from my slashing sword to a bludgeoning mace, right? One hand, two one-handeds, whatever you want. Middle mouse, I set that to mace. Awesome. That's why we're using retribution instead of berserk ripping for this version, because I'm using maces. Berserk ripping would be the alternative to retribution if I was going for that slash bleed build. I say slash, I mean to say slashing weapon. Gargoyle Greatsword of Limitless Rage, again, critical strike, core skill damage, strength, vulnerable damage. Each point of fury you generate while at max fury grants your next whirlwind up to 60% increased damage. And again, emeralds inside. So we want to have a lot of fury going on. Boom. Then we hold it down and we just start spinning and we do a big whirlwind. As for your rings, 2 things here. Bold Chieftain's Band and the Echoing Fury. So your shout skill, basically, let's look how the rings roll too, by the way. On rings, it'd be nice to have something like this. Vulnerable damage, damage to close, critical strike chance, critical strike damage. That's fine. You could also get something that has like life on it if that's what you're interested in. I prefer having these 4 stats, so I'm looking for those as we go. Let's go over the Bold Chieftains first. It's a tricky ring to find, and I'd recommend you do Helltide content or gamble with obols at the Purveyor of Curiosities. If you can't get the Bold Chieftain's Band, it's not that you're totally screwed. It just makes it so much better. Whenever you cast a shout skill, its cooldown's reduced by up to 1.9 seconds per nearby enemy, up to a max of 6 seconds. That's just ideal. Like, that makes it so much better. But if you can't get one, check out Mother's Embrace that you get by killing Lilith in the campaign. The unique ability says if Whirlwind hits 5 or more enemies, up to 40% of the resource cost is refunded. Well, that's pretty good. That allows you to continuously have this smooth Whirlwind gameplay and just spin a little bit longer. That's why I'd recommend, if you go back to the build here that we talked about, right? I think in the beginning for most players, it's going to be great for you to go with Furious instead of Violent, because Furious, you don't have to worry about channeling for 2 seconds to make something happen. Furious just lets that happen instantaneously. So I think that in the beginning, Mother's Embrace is going to help you with that. Use that ring to your advantage as much as you can. But again, hitting 4 enemies doesn't give you much, so you're going to want to pull a bunch of monsters together to get the effect of Mother's Embrace until you get Bold Chieftains. And then in addition, the Band of Echoing Fury, okay? The legendary ability of that says your shouts generate up to 4 fury per second while active. And it is per shout, by the way. So it's not, hey, I have all my shouts up, I get 4 per second. It's 4, 8, 12 all together. So 12 is pretty relevant. And for me, mine costs 36 fury per second. And having all the shouts up, just having the shouts up alone gives me 12 fury. So that's pretty fantastic. As for the amulet, you're looking for a really good one. I'm okay with this one. +3 to all defensive skills would be huge, but I didn't get that. So I'm going with movement speed, fury cost reduction, ranks of no mercy, which gives me increased critical strike chance, and then cooldown reduction. Again, cooldown is important, and you want to get cooldown wherever you can. And for me, I've got cooldown here on my neck and on my helmet, and that's working so far. If you're wondering why some people have rubies, some people have sapphires in their gear, I'm pushing high content nightmare dungeons, what I consider high, 65, 70, that kind of thing. And so I'm now using sapphires because I'm fortified all the time and I want to reduce the damage mobs are dealing. If you just want to have a larger HP pool, that's okay, go with rubies. I think that sapphires is ultimately better, but in the slog of leveling up and on your way through the game, it's okay to use rubies too, and you may find situations where that's helping you leech more and so on and so forth. So use what you want. Either one goes in the the helmet, 2 in the chest, 2 in the legs. Ultimately, I think you get to sapphires, but rubies are okay too. I use them for a while. And for the jewelry, we're using armor because armor is massive in this game. Look what armor does. I have 7,700, right? Okay, sure. The total armor granted by all your equipped items, it reduces physical damage taken from enemies equal to the level by 65%. But in addition, non-physical damage taken is reduced according to your armor contribution. So yeah, it reduces physical damage, and then non-physical, like fire, lightning, that fucking poison that I have no idea how to stop. I think it's bugged. But yeah, armor is very relevant, very important. So get that where you can, and enjoy. Let's take a look at the Paragon board for this 100 mace-wielding, demon-slaying barb, okay? The glyph we're going to put in the first slot available is Wrath. It's going to give us critical strike damage with core skills and generate Fury whenever we critically strike, which is all the time. The second board is going to be Weapons Master board that we attach into, and the glyph is going to be Martial. Martial's nice because it gives us plenty of things as we level it up. Increased physical damage, more armor, dex, which helps us crit, willpower, which helps everything else in the Paragon board. Willpower also gives us resource generation. But one of the nicest things about Martial is that after casting a shout skill, the active cooldown of every other shout skill is reduced. So by shouting, you reduce the cooldowns of other shouts. So that's kind of nice. One thing I was a little bit late to the party on, I recommend you do this, is get Hunter Killer. It's just two choice, man. 32% damage to elites, and then you get an additional movement speed after you kill an elite, so you're twirling around, killing things. This helps you kill them faster. It also helps you move to the next pack of elites and slay out. In addition, players are also considered elites, so in PvP, this isn't the worst thing in the world. Kind of nice. The next board is going to be the Warbringer board, and we're going to be putting in the glyph called Exploit. Exploit is a massive glyph for the Barbarian. In particular, because it gives you vulnerable damage, but also when an enemy is damaged by you, so whenever you hit an enemy with Whirlwind, they're instantaneously vulnerable for 3 seconds, but that can't happen any more than 20 seconds with the glyph. But you can also make them vulnerable from your skills, so that's really huge, from your build, right? Awesome. Exploit makes the barb feel real nice. And one of the reasons your barb's going to feel kind of shitty is once you hit 50, that's cool. Your adventure starts down here, but you got to get 4 Paragon points per level. And as you're navigating up, you're wanting to make sure that you get some of the nodes, and it's all good, but let's continue on. Where the barb becomes really smooth gameplay-wise is right here in this cluster, in my opinion. You start to get maximum Fury, which is cool, but you get Fury on kill. So you're getting Fury when you get hit, you're getting Fury when you kill, you're getting Fury because you're shouting. These little subsets of nodes here are very, very good for the barb. The Fury on kill is quite good. At this stage, I'm not even getting all the Fury on kill that I could, and that's okay because I'm all right with the way that the gameplay is going for me. So again, that's Warbringer board. Connecting into Warbringer, we have the Decimator board, and we're going to be using the Might glyph. Might is sort of new tech. It gives you vulnerable damage to enemies, which is something that we want. It gives you damage reduction from vulnerable enemies, so if something's vulnerable because you twirled into it with Whirlwind, it does less damage. Also gives you willpower, which gives you increased resource gen, i.e. Fury. But then you deal 8% increased multiplicative damage with two-handed weapons, which is slashing or bludgeoning, so that works for us. Moving on, the next board. We've got Bonebreaker board, and the glyph we're going to put in there is Territorial. So we'll deal more damage to close enemies, and we get to enjoy 10% increased damage reduction against those close enemies. Pretty nice. And finally, we're going to move into the Flawless Technique board, and the glyph we're going to use here is Undaunted. So we deal some amount of damage while fortified, which we always are, pretty much, but then we gain an additional 10% damage reduction the more Fortify that you have. So if you got a lot of Fortify, you're going to reduce even more damage from things that are giving you trouble in the game, like demons, undead, and other spiders that lock you down for no reason and keep you in poison and kick your ass. Thanks, Undaunted. So let's dig our feet into the Paragon board just a little bit more, because this is where all that player power comes for the barb, and I think basically every class in the game. When you're leveling up, it's true your board's obviously not going to look like this. You're making decisions like, do I just go to the next board? Should I be getting these rare magical nodes? Like, what should I be doing? I looked at it this way when I was leveling up. I wanted to get the most power out of that board as long as it made sense to, and then the opportunity where I could go get another glyph and then empower it, like get that second benefit, that's what I did. So I tried to get the most out of, let's say, Wrath, right? I made sure that I had 25 dexterity, and once I had that, I was good to go. And then I'd start picking up rare nodes and then the magical ones if it made sense, right? Cool. And then I said, hey, wait a second, the math, right? I can click, 6 more nodes. I can finally connect to that other glyph, and on that way in there, I can actually connect it to get the second benefit. I will just go ahead and unselect some of these rare ones if it makes sense, and then go into that glyph. That's kind of what I did over and over and over, and it worked for me. It was pretty seamless, and I enjoyed it. But as a barbarian, life's not going to be that easy for you. As cool as it is to have Wrath giving you 3 Fury every time you crit, that may not be the best choice for you. Leveling off, you're probably going to play the slashing build because it's just great, right? Look at this glyph you can get called Disembowel. Disembowel says whenever you kill a bleeding enemy, you have a 10% chance to reduce the cooldowns of your non-ultimate active cooldowns by 1 second. So in English, because you're whirlwinding everything, right? It's all bleeding. Whenever something dies, there's a 10% chance whenever anything dies that you can reset the cooldown on your shouts, which is nice because when shouts come up, that's when you're doing more damage, you're more defensive. If you have the echoing fury ring, right? You're generating all kinds of fury per active shout. Your rallying cries coming up, so you're good to go, right? It makes life easy. Easy gameplay is nice, and Disembowel does that for you. Now, mine's 21, but just start with it. You might end up going Ren later on to go ahead and kill Echo of Lilith or some other challenging fight, or do some team play and parties and stuff, or kill a world boss in 2 hits. Whatever you're gonna do, whatever you want to do is fine, right? But I guess what I'm trying to tell you is the game is more than just these glyphs that I've shown you here. And there are options if you look into them, like Revenge is kind of cool for Thorns. Maybe you want to check that out. There are options for you in Whirlwind that might make it a little bit easier for you. Like, I really like Exploit. I might tell people, hey, like right now, why wouldn't you just go with Disembowel, then take Martial, and then go Exploit? Or maybe you go Exploit first, so you make sure everything's vulnerable. If everything's vulnerable right off the rip, you're going to clear it out really quick, and then you don't have to spin to win as much because they're already dead. It might make sense to do that. Now, glyphs drop randomly in the world, so you may not have these ones. You can use the ones you have to your advantage, and you level them up through completing Nightmare Dungeons. So just run a couple Nightmare Dungeons, get some better gear, level up your glyphs, get the power benefit from it, and hopefully that smooths the experience for you. The pivotal critical point here is it doesn't have to be just these glyphs. Disembowel is another option you have to smooth gameplay out in the early levels. And other than that, check to see if you're getting all the power that you want out of the board. Like, I would recommend you get Hunter Killer before you move on. It's just that good. But you might feel different about it. I think that would help. So I'm telling you, I think you should do it. A lot of options here in the Paragon board. To master it is very crazy. And I hope you have fun in there. You might have different board choices. That's cool too. Share in the comments below what boards you guys use and what glyphs do you use in those boards. Like, what choices are different than what I've got. Let me know. Would love to make an even bigger, huger barb. Why the hell not, right? Guy goes to the gym, doesn't look like he goes to the gym. Let's move on. Looking at elixirs for the barb, you can get any level of this elixir that you want. Either one. I think either one works. My go-to is the precision elixir. Increases my critical strike chance and critical strike damage and my experience. They all give you experience by 5% for 30 minutes. That just helps me destroy things, right? Crit all the time, get that critical strike damage up. Love to see it. If I wanted a more defensive route, the Iron Barb Elixir is pretty great. It gives you increased armor by 500, gives you some thorns, added value, which is kind of nice, and also, like every other elixir, gives you experience increase for 30 minutes. When it comes to PvP, player versus player with the Whirlwind Barbarian, it's okay. It doesn't hold a candle to a Hoda Barb. A Hoda Barb will embarrass classes. A Hoda Barb is nasty as hell. The Whirlwind, again, I think it's very good for the PvE, player versus everything, or like grinding dungeons with your friends. Just easy, smooth gameplay. That's where Whirlwind's great. Bring that into a PvP situation where spike damage matters and just clapping people in a short time frame. That's not really what Whirlwind does, so I would not recommend that you go into PvP with a Whirlwind build thinking you're going to be all that in the cat's ass, because you're going to get humbled real fast. So don't do the PvP stuff as much. Do that with, like, say, a Hammer of the Ancients, a Hoda build, and just enjoy, you know, enjoy sigil, glyph grinding, all that jazz. Do Nightmare Sigils, do that. Do Tree of Whispers, do Helltides, Whirlwind, fantastic. PvP, not so much. Okay, so that's all the stuff I would want to know if I was going to get into the Barb class in Diablo 4. You got the slashing spec, the bludgeoning spec. They're there for you. The decisions as to, like, why and why not. Outside of that, I'm going to give you some gameplay going through some Nightmare Dungeons, level 40 and up, just to give you an idea what the build actually looks like when you put it all together. If it's not for you, that's cool. If it is, right on. Hope this video helped. Let me know. Again, I looked at it from the same perspective as maybe you guys. What would I want to know? And I hope that this comprehensive Barb guide kind of gets you on the tracks to doing more damage and enjoying this amazing video game. I love it a lot. Can't get enough. So the next video will most likely be a Hoda Barb for PvP. We just have to smash some people. Again, drop some fridges on their face and let them know what's for dinner, right? Catch you guys in the next one. Enjoy the content. Much love. Adios.
are the answer to my prayers.
Wouldn't have made it without you. Bless you.